This name resonates through history like few others. The man they called Scarface wasn't just a gangster. He was the gangster, the template upon which Hollywood built its entire mythology of organized crime. But behind the legend lies a far more complex story. One of immigrant struggle, calculated violence, and the peculiar opportunity created by America's most misguided social experiment, Prohibition. This is the true story of how a Brooklyn street thug became public enemy number one. The sole purpose of this video is to relate historical facts. Thank you for not seeing any apology to organized crime. Before we begin, please like and subscribe if you enjoy these historical deep dives. More importantly, drop a comment telling me which gangster or crime story you want covered next. January 17, 1899. In a cramped tenement apartment in Brooklyn's Navy Yard section, Teresina Capone gave birth to her fourth son, Alphonse Gabriel Capone. His parents had immigrated from Italy with dreams of opportunity, joining millions of Southern Europeans seeking their fortune in America. Gabriele worked as a barber while Teresina took in sewing work, their fingers constantly moving to feed their 9 children. The Capones were law-abiding people trying desperately to succeed in their adopted homeland. But America wasn't kind to Italian immigrants. They faced discrimination at every turn, ghettoized in the poorest neighborhoods where opportunities were scarce. Young Alphonse grew up surrounded by poverty and violence. Street gangs controlled Brooklyn's neighborhoods, fighting over territory with fists and knives. Violence was constant, something you witnessed daily. At school, Alphonse was intelligent but resistant to authority. The breaking point came at age 14 when he struck a teacher and was expelled immediately, his formal education ending in 6th grade. That same year, he formed his own street gang, the Navy Street Boys. Even at 14, he displayed natural leadership, physically imposing, fearless, and possessing an instinctive understanding of loyalty and hierarchy. Scarface is born. Dropping out meant needing work. Through neighborhood contacts, young Capone came to the attention of Johnny Torrio, a sophisticated criminal who understood that organized crime could be a business. Torrio introduced him to Frankie Yale, who ran the Harvard Inn, a Coney Island bar, dance hall, and brothel. At the Harvard Inn, Capone collected debts, intimidated rowdy customers, and kept prostitutes in line. He was good at it, learning how criminal enterprises operated. But it was here, one night in 1917, that he received his most famous scar and enduring nickname. Capone saw an attractive young woman and made crude sexual remarks. The woman complained to her companion, her brother, Frank Galluccio, a small-time gangster with a hot temper. When Capone refused to apologize, Galluccio pulled a knife and slashed his face 3 times. The wounds required stitches and left permanent scars, particularly one running from his left ear across his cheek to his jaw. From that night forward, he was Scarface, a nickname he despised. In photographs, he always positioned himself to hide the left side of his face. When asked about the scars, he lied, claiming they were war wounds. Interestingly, Capone never sought revenge. Years later, when powerful, he actually hired Galluccio as a bodyguard, demonstrating his pragmatic approach to former enemies. The brief dream of legitimacy. In 1918, Capone married May Josephine Coughlin, an Irish-American woman pregnant with their son, Albert Francis "Sonny" Capone. Marriage and fatherhood seemed to change him. He spoke of wanting legitimate work to provide for his family. He moved to Baltimore and found work as a bookkeeper, utilizing skills he'd picked up through criminal work. Capone had always been good with numbers. In Baltimore, away from Brooklyn's temptations and dangers, he worked honestly and lived quietly for nearly 2 years. Had this continued, Alphonse Capone would have disappeared into middle-class anonymity. His name would mean nothing today. But on November 14, 1920, his father Gabriel died suddenly of a heart attack, forcing him to return to Brooklyn. There, surrounded by old friends and former associates, the criminal life reclaimed him. Chicago calls. By 1920, Capone had developed a reputation as effective but dangerously violent. Stories circulated about killings he'd committed. His mentors, Frankie Yale and Lucky Luciano, worried he was attracting too much police attention. They needed him gone. Fortunately, Johnny Torrio had moved to Chicago and was building a criminal empire there. When Torrio asked for recommendations, Yale suggested his former bartender. In late 1920, with $2,000 in his pocket, 21-year-old Alphonse Capone boarded a train for Chicago with May and Sonny. Chicago, in 1920, was transformed by Prohibition. The 18th Amendment had created the greatest criminal opportunity in American history. Millions of Americans still wanted to drink, and gangsters who could supply that demand stood to make fortunes. Johnny Torrio understood this better than most. He wasn't a traditional gangster relying on pure violence. He was a businessman who happened to work in crime. Under Torrio's mentorship, Capone absorbed crucial lessons: keep books, cultivate political connections, know when violence is necessary and when it's counterproductive, think strategically. Capone started at the bottom but learned quickly. Torrio taught him to dress well, be seen at legitimate establishments, and cultivate a public persona. The money was extraordinary. Prohibition had made alcohol artificially scarce and valuable. By 1922, Capone had risen to become Torrio's right-hand man, earning $25,000 to $50,000 annually, equivalent to nearly $1 million today. Death in Cicero. By 1924, Chicago's reform mayor was actually enforcing prohibition laws. Torrio and Capone needed a safer base. They chose Cicero, a suburb west of Chicago, with an audacious plan: completely take over the town. The key was the April 1924 election. They needed their candidate, Republican Joseph Clenha, to win. Capone brought his brothers Frank and Ralph. On election day, over 200 gangsters flooded Cicero, intimidating voters and beating opposition supporters. But honest citizens called for help. County Judge Edmund Jarecki deputized 70 Chicago police officers and sent them to Cicero in unmarked cars. When plainclothes officers emerged, nervous gang members drew guns, unsure if they faced rivals or law enforcement. Frank Capone reached for his gun outside a polling place. The officers didn't hesitate. They shot Frank multiple times, killing him in the street. Al Capone was devastated. The victory in Cicero, Clenha won easily, tasted like ashes. Capone gave Frank an elaborate $20,000 funeral. It marked his final transformation from enforcer to boss, taking command. In January 1925, Johnny Torrio survived an assassination attempt by rival gangsters. Terrified and aware of his mortality, he decided to retire. Torrio handed control to his 25-year-old protege. Al Capone now ruled Chicago's most powerful criminal syndicate. His annual income exploded to an estimated $100 million, roughly $1.5 billion today, from bootlegging, prostitution, gambling, and racketeering. He employed hundreds: rum runners, drivers, guards, bartenders, enforcers, accountants, lawyers, and politicians on his payroll. He was young, rich, and powerful, and completely trapped in a life that would inevitably destroy him. The gang wars begin. Chicago was divided among several major gangs, each controlling territory and markets. The North Side was dominated by Irish gangs, initially led by Dean O'Banion. Everyone fought for control of enormously profitable bootlegging. Dean O'Banion was Capone's most dangerous rival, charismatic, violent, and ambitious. They initially tried coexistence, but Prohibition Chicago was too profitable for peace to last. In November 1924, O'Banion was murdered in his flower shop. 3 men walked in and shot him 6 times. Everyone knew Torrio and Capone had ordered the hit. O'Banion's murder triggered a war lasting years. His successors, Jaime Weiss and George "Bugs" Moran, swore revenge. They attempted to kill Torrio in January 1925, succeeding only in wounding him and scaring him into retirement. With Capone in charge, they had a new target. The violence was spectacular and frequent. Drive-by shootings became common. Bombs destroyed speakeasies and homes. Bodies appeared regularly in alleys and vacant lots. Chicago became a war zone. Innocent bystanders were caught in crossfire. Business owners lived in fear. Tommy guns, Thompson submachine guns, became the weapon of choice, firing hundreds of rounds per minute. In October 1926, Capone ordered Jaime Weiss's assassination. Gunmen opened fire with machine guns outside his headquarters. Weiss died in a hail of bullets. The assassination was so brazen, it shocked even violence-hardened Chicago. But one Irish rival remained, Bugs Moran, and dealing with Moran would lead to Capone's most infamous crime: the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. By 1929, Capone controlled most of Chicago's organized crime, but Bugs Moran's North Side gang remained a persistent problem. Capone decided to eliminate it permanently. The plan was elaborate. Capone's men spread word of a special whiskey shipment arriving at a North Side garage on February 14, 1929. The location was 2122 North Clark Street, used by Moran's gang as a distribution point. On Valentine's Day morning, 7 men gathered at the garage. 5 gang members, plus a mechanic and an optometrist in the wrong place at the wrong time. At 10:30 a.m., a police car pulled up. 4 men emerged, 2 dressed as police officers, 2 in civilian clothes. The men in the garage weren't alarmed. Raids were routine, usually resolved with bribes. The police officers ordered the 7 men to line up against the wall for a standard search. They complied without resistance, expecting a shakedown. Then the shooting started. The 4 gunmen, actually Capone's men disguised as police, opened fire with Thompson submachine guns and shotguns. They methodically executed all 7 men, riddling their bodies with bullets at close range. Over 70 bullets were fired. The victims died facing the wall, shot in the back. The killers walked out calmly, the plainclothes men pretending to be under arrest, maintaining the deception for witnesses. They drove away in the fake police car, disappearing into Chicago's streets. Inside, the scene was horrific. Blood everywhere, bodies torn apart. One victim, Frank Gusenberg, was still barely alive when real police arrived. Riddled with 14 bullets and dying, he refused to identify his attackers. "Nobody shot me," he gasped before dying. The gangster code held even in death. But there was a crucial failure. Bugs Moran wasn't among the dead. Running late, he'd spotted the police car and walked past, assuming it was a raid. He survived, though his gang was destroyed. The massacre shocked America. 7 men executed, shot in the back while facing a wall. The brutality captured national attention. Newspapers ran the story for weeks. Everyone knew Capone had ordered it, though he was conveniently in Florida establishing an alibi. No one was ever convicted. But the massacre marked a turning point. Capone had gone too far. Public enemy number one. The St. Valentine's Day massacre made Al Capone a national problem. President Herbert Hoover personally ordered federal law enforcement to make destroying Capone's organization a priority. Capone was designated public enemy number one. But prosecuting him for actual crimes proved nearly impossible. Witnesses refused to testify. Evidence disappeared. Juries could be bribed or threatened. Local police and judges were on his payroll. Murder charges were impossible despite everyone knowing he'd ordered dozens of killings. Federal prosecutors needed a different approach. They found it in the tax code. Al Capone earned millions annually but filed no tax returns. The 16th Amendment required all income to be reported and taxed, even illegal income. A team of Treasury agents, led by investigator Frank J. Wilson, began building a case. Wilson was methodical, patient, and incorruptible. He spent months tracking financial records, interviewing bookkeepers, analyzing cash flows. His breakthrough came when he found evidence of Capone's gambling income. A ledger showed regular payments to AC, Al Capone, representing substantial taxable income. In June 1931, a federal grand jury indicted Al Capone for income tax evasion covering 1925-1929. After decades of violence, after countless murders, Capone would face justice for the most mundane crime, not paying taxes. (1931–1947) The trial. The trial began October 6, 1931, in federal court in Chicago. It was a media sensation. Reporters from around the world packed the courtroom. Capone arrived daily in expensive suits, smiling confidently. He believed he'd bribed the jury. But presiding Judge James H. Wilkerson had learned about the jury tampering. On the trial's first day, he made an announcement. He was switching juries with another courtroom. The jury Capone had cultivated would hear a different case. Suddenly, Capone faced strangers he couldn't control. His confident smile disappeared. The trial lasted 11 days. Federal prosecutors presented detailed evidence of Capone's income and spending. They showed he'd purchased expensive property, paid for lavish furnishings, spent freely at restaurants. Witnesses testified to his gambling income. They demonstrated substantial cash flow and proved he'd filed no tax returns. Capone's defense argued he had no direct income, that money belonged to others, that he was merely a front man. It was weak, undermined by documentary evidence. On October 17th, after 8 hours of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on 5 counts. On October 24th, Judge Wilkerson sentenced Capone to 11 years in federal prison, extraordinarily harsh for tax evasion at that time. Al Capone, who'd survived gang wars and assassination attempts, was brought down by an accountant and the tax code. Prison and declined Capone initially served time at Cook County Jail while appeals were filed. He maintained connections and enjoyed privileges. But when appeals failed and he transferred to federal penitentiary in Atlanta, conditions became stricter. Worse, his health was deteriorating. He'd contracted syphilis years earlier, probably from prostitutes. The disease had gone untreated for over a decade. By 1932, it was entering tertiary stage, attacking his brain and causing neurosyphilis. Symptoms started subtly: memory problems, difficulty concentrating, occasional confusion. In August 1934, Capone was transferred to Alcatraz, the island fortress designed to hold America's most dangerous criminals. There were no privileges, no special treatment, no contact with the outside world. Capone became prisoner 85, working in the laundry. At Alcatraz, the syphilis worsened dramatically. By 1936, symptoms were unmistakable. Capone suffered memory loss, confusion, and childlike behavior. Medical examinations confirmed tertiary syphilis had caused permanent brain damage. At age 37, he had the mental capacity of a 12-year-old child. In January 1939, having served 7.5 years, Capone was released early due to his deteriorating health. He was 40 years old, but his mind was gone. The final years Capone spent his final years at his Palm Island, Florida estate. His wife, May, cared for him devotedly. His son, Sonny, visited when he could, but Capone barely recognized them sometimes. The syphilis had destroyed large portions of his brain. His daily routine was simple and sad. He sat by the pool, sometimes playing cards. He enjoyed fishing but often forgot where he was. His conversations jumped between past and present, reality and delusion. Sometimes he thought he was still running Chicago. Other times he didn't know who he was. On January 21, 1947, Capone suffered a stroke. On January 25th, he suffered cardiac arrest. Al Capone died surrounded by family, age 48, his mind having departed years before his body. His funeral was quiet, attended by family and a few old associates. The man who'd once commanded headlines worldwide died in relative obscurity. He was buried at Mount Carmel Cemetery in Illinois in a simple plot, his tombstone bearing just his name and dates. What remains of Al Capone? A legend that often bears little resemblance to reality. Popular culture has transformed him into a glamorous anti-hero who lived life on his own terms. Hollywood discovered Capone almost immediately. Films, television series, books, and documentaries have kept the legend alive, each adding fictional embellishments. This mythology remembers the expensive suits, the swagger, the defiance of authority. It emphasizes his philanthropy, soup kitchens during the Depression, generosity to neighbors. Some portrayals cast him as a victim of unjust prosecution, brought down for minor tax violations. But the reality was darker. Capone was absolutely a product of poverty, discrimination, and lack of opportunity. However, he was also a violent criminal who built his fortune through bootlegging, prostitution, gambling, and murder. He terrorized Chicago, corrupted officials at every level, and left bodies in his wake. His supposed philanthropy was strategic public relations. The soup kitchens opened after the St. Valentine's Day massacre when his image needed rehabilitation. He wasn't Robin Hood. He was a racketeer buying goodwill. The tax evasion conviction wasn't unjust persecution. Capone earned millions through criminal enterprises and paid nothing in taxes. That he was convicted for tax evasion rather than murder was prosecutorial strategy, not injustice. That's the story of Alphonse Gabriel Capone. From Brooklyn poverty to Chicago power, to Alcatraz imprisonment, to Florida senility. A spectacular, violent, tragic American story that continues to resonate nearly a century later. The glamour of gangster life is Hollywood invention. The reality is always much darker. Thank you for watching this comprehensive documentary on Al Capone. If you found this historical examination informative, please like, share, and subscribe. Until then, stay safe and remember the lessons of history.